I think I'll call the meeting to order. Betsy, note the attendance.
Oh, okay. Yes, that was Scott Badger, Vice Chair.
No, you don't have to go through it.
Oh, okay.
Make
Good.
note of it. It'll be fun.
I was afraid you were going to test my memory. Who are you again?
Okay, in the minutes of February 8th, with our copy.
We had no March meeting, which is why it's the February minutes.
Do I have a motion to accept minutes?
I'm in the motion.
Second. Any discussion? Has everyone had a chance to go through? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote. Okay. First order of business is any public comment not on the agenda. Given that we don't have any public. So the next item is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing for the review and adoption of rules of procedure for the board and conflict of interest policy. There is those, and copies here if anyone. Tom or any of you guys?
That's okay, thank you. Do you want a copy?
I'm not sure.
It's our rules and procedures, how we try
thanks.
to operate.
Okay, thank you. I'll read those and I hope I abide.
I have to say, we've read over these for, it seems, weeks, trying to settle on things, and I suddenly realized that our bylaws has a paragraph on what happens if people don't, if people are a member of the planning board or an alternate, but they don't come to meetings. And so that was written out of our bylaws and put it in here. So that's the major change that indicates that if we don't show up, at the bottom of page 1, it says that if we don't show up, we will give that information to the Board of Selectmen, hoping that they will do it for different persons, basically.
If we can find that person.
So I wanted to get on board.
So that's this down here.
Yes.
Well, we'll certainly move company up as soon as that happens.
Well, I'm probably gonna miss two.
We all miss.
And Sarah's our wordsmith, and they come up with better ways to phrase this. It's basically out of the bylaws, but
Does that constitute a change?
Oh, sorry.
Sufficient to?
no, as it turns out, we don't have to have a public hearing for this at all. When we first adopted, for some reason, the state law is that we have to have a public hearing if we're going to amend it after adoption.
Okay.
So this is fine.
Is there any discussion on that change of Betsy's? Sarah, you mentioned just a couple of things.
Page 2, under Article 6, number 5, fifth line down, it says, and any deliberations and the public hearing should be at the space between the and public.
Under number 5.
Right. Actually, it's
which article again?
Article 7,
Oh,
6.
Article 6, okay.
Article 6, I'm sorry.
The purpose of the meeting.
Just-
Could you read me again?
Is-
Okay, right.
A disqualified member shall not participate in any deliberations, and the public hearing on the matter. There's a space is needed, and I thought it was supposed to say deliberations at the public hearing.
Okay,
Or
great.
wait, and, or is it supposed to be and?
Right, I think it was meant to be and the public hearing, but
Okay.
maybe we ought to have it at, whatever people think. Either way, this is just a housekeeping thing and it
Right.
might need us to discuss again.
I may have just marked it for the need for space there.
Yeah, that sounded a little smoother to me.
Because the deliberations would be at the public hearing unless there are other deliberations before or after.
I think maybe instead of the and, it was meant to be at. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Well, if you're looking at that, a disqualified member shall not participate in any deliberation in the public hearing. We see the difference there. Public hearing on the matter, but shouldn't that be a comma?
Or instead of the and, we were thinking of this where it should be at, any deliberations at the public hearing on the matter. Because it's not talking about two different things, it's deliberations at the hearing, I think.
I've already changed mine, so I hope it passes.
That's fine, but you see at the end of matter, I mean, shouldn't that be a comma? Help me participate. I don't think that's a very good sentence, just a simple,
Oh, that's a good point.
Correct, yeah.
Great.
Should be a comma.
Some sort of involve that.
you didn't follow that?
No, I'm barely seeing the print, so I was trying to find it at the same time I was trying to listen. Can you repeat that, Chris?
Yeah, so right in the middle of number 5 there, a
Yeah.
disqualified member shall not participate in any deliberation in we gotta separate that, the public hearing on the matter, but may participate as a member of the general public. So I'm just saying that it's not a new sentence, that's just a comma.
Between
Oh, okay.
matter
Oh,
and
got it.
But matter.
And the word between deliberations and the public hearing was going to be at instead of and.
Yeah, okay. And did you see it in the typo?
Oh, it's, a need for a comma. I'm really getting nitpicky. But then, considering,
You're not nitpicking,
Considering
somebody
who
else
taught
will be.
who taught me how to proofread said that we shall let no nit be unpicked. But anyway, it's on page, on the back of the second page. It's number 2 before Article 11. Okay. Personal notice shall be made by certified mail to the applicant, all butters, and any professional whose seal appears on the plat. Yes, there should be a comma after plat.
I'm looking at Article 11.
No, above.
Yeah,
Oh,
number
okay,
2.
I see.
Number 2, second line.
Okay.
Whose seal appears on any plat. There should be a comma there to set off that phrase.
Okay. I think we ought to approve these before we make too many more changes.
That was all I found. I And actually, I found that weeks ago when we first moved back.
You say after complete?
No, I took flat.
Did you find out where it is?
Well, that's all right. I just always thought when in doubt, leave it out.
Well, it's because they're not less than 30 days pertains to the notice
And not to
made
the,
by certified mail.
and not to the
Not to the
person.
seal.
Okay.
Any other issues? I have a motion to accept the rules of procedure as amended. There's 3 instances.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
And
Opposed? Okay. We have copies of that. Is that all right?
I brought one copy because we haven't read it, but basically we approved it at the last meeting, we signed it, and now it's Huntley here. It was to be finalized at the March meeting, which we didn't hold,
Okay.
and so with Huntley here, I've brought for his signature, and then we may as well all sign it, so we're all on the same page, and we'll
So
finalize.
we were just gonna sign it at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay, now I'm an alternate, so I still sign.
That's okay, I think,
And tonight it will be a voting member.
that's right. And if anyone does want to review it, it's right there. It's not a requirement that we have it, but it just seemed to make sense.
Now, if anybody questions it, I'm actually on the tax rolls as George Allen. That's what I'm going to let you know, so just in case you have a
So if you
question.
see George Allen doing nefarious things, you'll know. Do you want to do the subdivision fees now, or do it after?
I want to do that after.
Okay.
We'll switch the agenda a little bit, and Tom,
I'm up.
you do something.
I'm wondering what the camera, want me to stand down here? I can do that.
Sure.
Everybody's here. And I had prepared a more formal presentation, which I suppose I'll stick with, to make sure I cover everything. All right? Hi, thank you for inviting me here tonight. I think most of you know me, or not all. My name is Ann Pillion. I live in Bartlett, and have here Tom Gross, he lives in Conway. And we're board members of the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust. Given my time slot, I prepared a 10-minute statement because I want to make sure I'm succinct, thorough, stay on track, and most importantly, I don't want to run the risk of making my subject of water a dry topic. Thank you. We're here tonight to provide a brief summary of our drinking water project that we've been working on, and we hope to schedule a formal presentation of the project to the town of Jackson sometime in the near future. I was asked here to just brief what is it we're looking for and what exactly is it. We're currently in the process of scheduling meeting presentations with the 8 towns included in this project, and the 8 towns are Albany, Bartlett, Chatham, Conway, Eaton, Hart's Location, Jackson, and Madison. This group of us meeting here tonight happens to be our first
face-to-face in this outreach process. So congratulations and thank you as well. To give some context as to the why of our project, clean drinking water is the most essential natural resource, and groundwater is our most important source of drinking water. Our source water supply lands are not sufficiently protected, and the most effective protection requires local involvement. When it comes to groundwater resources, as the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Easy to contaminate, difficult and expensive and long-term to clean up. As to my why, the majority of my career was as an environmental consultant where I investigated and assessed chemical contamination at contaminated waste sites, mostly within New England, and I'll say at hundreds of contaminated waste sites. One local example, years ago, I conducted many months of field work at the Kearsarge Metallurgical Site in Conway. Therefore, for me, to work at a local level to prevent contamination of our beautiful natural resources and protect the exceptionally clean and high quality of our drinking water is something important and possible to do. Approximately 2 years ago, the Upper Saco Valley Land Trust revisited and expanded our mission to be more of an ecosystem approach to land protection, including protection of water resources within our service area. In support of this expanding mission, last year we applied for and received a drinking water grant from New Hampshire DES. Our land trust service area includes the 8 New Hampshire towns I've mentioned, and 3 towns in Maine. These towns encompass the vast majority of the headwaters of the Saco River, the Ellis River, and the extensive Upper Saco Valley stratified drift aquifer. The project study area of the grant was limited to the 8 New Hampshire towns, as it was a New Hampshire state-funded grant. Our project included 3 distinct tasks for each town. First task, assess threats to groundwater by updating potential contamination sites as listed in New Hampshire DES's database. The findings and recommendations from this task are presented in a report titled The Potential Contamination Source Survey and Analysis, this document here. The second task, review groundwater protection ordinances and other aquifer protective measures. For example, zoning ordinances, site plan review regulations, subdivision regulations, town master plans. This review was limited to an internet research only. I mention that because we are working as part of our effort to solicit feedback from you all as to did we miss something or not. So it's kind of coming on a two-way street at that point when you're reviewing what we have found for Jackson. The findings and recommendations from this task are presented in a report titled Local Groundwater Protection Ordinance Review. And the title of this document here, the title is a little misleading. It's just not, we didn't just look at what ordinances were or weren't in place. The third task, conduct outreach to all 8 towns to present the findings of our project study regarding the potential contamination risks and threats to groundwater and information and actions that can improve local and regional groundwater protection. We have completed the information gathering, assessment, and report preparation phase of this process, and now look to meet with the individual towns for educational purposes. We hope to schedule this meeting presentation with you all soon, and our first town meeting scheduled happens to be at Hart's location on Monday, April 23rd at 5:30. Anyone interested is invited to attend. I had reached out and talked with Mark Dindorf, and he was happy to invite anyone to, if anyone wanted to hear it sooner, or if someone that couldn't make it here tonight wanted to attend that meeting. There will be a PowerPoint presentation at that meeting that's prepared by and given by our environmental consultant, FB Environmental, whom we had hired using the grant funding. They're our expert and consultant that we work with on this whole project. In summary, the overall goals of this project were to collect, evaluate, and share information among decision makers at the town level for purposes of providing public education and outreach regarding groundwater and drinking water protection opportunities and actions that can be taken. The reports include individual findings and recommendations specific to each town, so it's a universal report, and any town we hand it to can look at what was found for all the towns, and you'll find your own in there broken up. And these reports are the same reports that had been previously distributed electronically. Everyone's learning that. So, thank you, and I wanted to make sure we had time for any questions or clarification that you might have.
As I mentioned before, I only had a chance to skim the report, but, so I may have overlooked this, but is there data, or do you have access to data to show any sort of trend, either in a specific, per town or for a specific site in the town in terms of increasing contaminants or, changes in groundwater availability or something like that?
That piece of it isn't part of the project. It's just looking at potential contamination sites, and I want to make clear it is a term with DES, and it's defined and it includes something like 20 different business codes, if you will, of what would fall within. But we weren't looking at any existing. That's a whole massive effort of itself to look at what, like, concentrations of contaminants that
Yeah, it just in
already
terms
in
of
place.
making sort of a compelling argument, you could say, well, here's where you were at.
That's a good question.
Here,
Right.
1980, and here's
Right.
that kind of thing. And then the other question I had, I think one of the sites in Jackson that in the report sounded like it deserved greater attention was, I think it's the Eagle Mountain Golf
Yeah.
Course. So can you describe what, just as an example, what the potential problems would be with something like that, and then what the potential courses of action would be to protect an area like that?
That's a good question as well. The Eagle Mountain House is called out because there are vulnerable areas of land uses, and they are areas, all of them, that are over the stratified drift aquifer, which I'll explain that it's a high-yielding, a stratified drift aquifer is a high-yielding aquifer, and as such, it holds a lot of water, and you can economically pump a lot out of it easily. But on the flip side, it can be easily contaminated because it's so porous. And the Eagle Mountain House is sits on, overlies that, and I believe it was called out because it was within another identified character of areas overlying the aquifer is recharge areas for the aquifer, and those are areas that are known hydrogeologically to be taking in hopefully just rainwater, but any potential contaminants would be.
And is it the hotel itself that would be potentially a concern, or is it the golf course,
So-
and fertilizers used in the golf course, or what exactly would be the potential
You
issues?
might, yeah. I'm not sure on this, but I'm thinking if it was called out, golf courses is one land use code that we would include. So it certainly could be both reasons, but examples. So for issues around fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides are concerns. Especially you have the Wildcat River running through that golf course, so you have the non-point source introduction. But for the end, you have anything 5 gallons or greater of a regulated substance is considered in the waste codes to be captured. And so the amount of fuel, I don't know, I'm not certain, but if they use fuel oil or any kerosene, any stored fuels are issues when you have deliveries and in use, and old tanks may start leaking, so those would be issues. Anytime you have amounts of any regulated substance you have the spill issues, spills and leaking and incidental.
Just to add a little bit, could you explain the windshield survey and the fact that we didn't collect specific data on a specific site? Could you just explain?
So
part of the-
that's Tom's point. I'll explain what the process was to look at what potential contaminated sites, but we didn't get into the details of why we might capture that to be on the list. But how this report, the first task of our project, the potential contamination source survey, how this was conducted was using a template approach from DPS, and it was acquired as part of the grant to do what was called a windshield survey. We literally, between us volunteers and our environmental consultant, drove around all 8 towns with an existing already list from the DPS database of what potential contamination sites were in there, and we were ground truthing them and adding, correcting the existing ones on the list and adding any new ones.
And I was only asking about the Eagle Road just as an example of this.
It's a great question.
Getting my head wrapped around, you
Well,
know,
it begs another question that we hadn't
what
thought of.
kind of issues, you know, we might be dealing with. And then also, so if I mean, as far as the hotel is concerned and, you know, tanks that leak and spillage and that type of thing, can we see ways to, you know, to curb that sort of potential contaminant? But for the golf course, given that it's very unlikely that we're going to eliminate the golf course in some kind,
It's timing is how they,
into what kind of techniques would be used to mitigate the problem for something like a golf course?
That's what we're hoping to provide. So there'll be this is I just put together a brief overview. What there's a whole bunch of BMPs, for example. There don't have to be legal ordinances put in place that might be what you want to move towards, but it's a much longer process, I would imagine. There are best management practices that can be applied. There can be inspections that are done that make part of your process for addressing potential threats. And it would be, you know, looking at what they use, maybe suggesting a more sustainable approach to golf courses. I know those are exist out there. It's just sort of elevating that here are some potential threats. It's not to say that areas that we identified need to be eliminated or are bad or what have you. It's just there's always it's worthwhile to take a look and are the best practices being used and employed and used. There's quite extensive resources that are available on New Hampshire DES's website, specifically in the drinking water source protection program. So they would have, there's a whole bunch of guidance documents that could answer that question. But part of our presentation, we'll get into more detail as well.
Do you have investigating capability and authority when a question of a potential contamination site
The
arises?
planning board does not.
Is it within the town
The
authority?
board of selectmen would be the ones that would follow up on any, you know, anything like that if we had something in place to authorize them to do that.
Is this
we take recommendations from all boards, and Conservation Commission, Planning Board, but the real authority are the 3 selectmen.
Well, you know, we're still in the learning curve as well, and this is our first meeting, so a question that pops into my head, you might even know it better than I know, which is, how do you determine from your level that a potential contamination site that's listed in this study, such as the one you chose by example, the golf course, merits closer investigation? Is that
Well,
something
I don't
within you?
think we would have, or I don't think we have at the moment the resources to do something like that. That would require using some outside.
Because the next part we know, and we haven't tested it yet, this being the first meeting, is the grantors at the state mentioned that they could provide some technical assistance. But I'm afraid I don't know specifically what that often means. Do you?
It's explained on the website, but having worked with, I worked both with state environmental offices as well as federal, and we all know budgets are always tight, but their enforcement divisions are, they say right on the website, they cannot attempt to visit all these potential threats, so they do look to local,
So in terms of regulation, that would likely be something that the planning board would create, but it would be the board of selectmen that would, that would do the enforcement. But I would, my personal opinion is that for Jackson to, and this sounds like something that we ought to be looking at, closely, but for Jackson, to move, for new regulations to be approved, to sort of ensure that we're, providing protection. I think that would require, some sort of community education and outreach, and probably some way of displaying either there is an issue going on, or an issue is very likely or very high potential, to convince the town that, that there's worth additional regulation of any sort. Which
So-
others can weigh in, but it seems like.
My thought is you were talking, is who's going to enforce this, and who's going to have the ability to figure out there's a problem, and then, make a recommendation, and then come back and say, yeah, you've fulfilled what you...
Well, it would depend on the regulation and how much expertise was needed to, to verify what was going on.
That's right.
So, like a building inspector, it's, it's not just anyone on the board of selectmen that assesses the situation, in terms of, construction. We have a building inspector that does that, provides recommendations to the board of selectmen, and they act on those recommendations.
But is there somebody in the state?
So it would depend on what the regulation was as to whether it's something that could be easily assessed by a non-professional or require some sort of professional.
Yeah, that's my question about- And so one thing that DES used to do, and I don't know if they still do, they had a VRAP program, Volunteer River Assessment Program, and 8 or 10 years ago, it was very active. Jackson and Bartlett were working together. We had a team of, 8 or 10 people that would go around to 6 different rivers, maybe in each town. And so we had a batch of tests that we had to measure for, and part of it was how much road salt gets into the river, how much sand, etc., is there. So we were measuring all sorts of things, and I don't know if we would be measuring the kinds of things that we would be worried about as, pollution from Eagle Mountain or something. I think that was part of it.
But I don't think that type of assessment would be appropriate for any type of enforcement.
Well, no,
That would
it would
require
alert
some
us.
sort of professional.
It would alert us to a potential problem that we then ask an engineer to participate in or something, I would think.
So maybe
if I could back up on some of it, it's what we're sort of resurrecting as for discussion and looking at and actions you might take are more not so much the VRAP type things where you're looking at impact. It's proactive. It can be added on to your existing site plan or overlays or what you have already in place to include restricting land uses, for example. And I'm talking about just future, because we know there'll be future development pressures, and putting in place so they can't put, say, this is a recharge zone and develop a gas station here, that you'd have already restrictive areas that you can, the maps exist to look at where these sensitive areas are, and you can make what you have already in place more robust for groundwater protection measures. So it's preventative, and for your comment or question earlier about what can you show people, it's well known globally, nationally, locally that we have threats to groundwater. Without clean drinking water, you don't have much in the community. And it's just, and I haven't mentioned this document. There's a lot more that we'll be presenting when we can. The report looking at what is already in place in towns was measured against this document. which was created by DES as ready to go, take off the shelf groundwater protection program. It's a model ordinance. You might have seen in the reports that Madison has already adopted this. They're sort of the gold standard. They've got in place pretty robust groundwater protection. Following a lot of this got updated and since they put theirs in place, and I don't think they've incorporated some of the new updates. Conway has some of these ordinances in place.
But it raises a question that we haven't really addressed in our work, but it sounds important in this discussion, is that strengthens prevention to the degree that a town might implement this model ordinance. But your name again, sir?
Scott.
Scott, the question you were raising is also about identifying a threat real time and remediating it if necessary. So that's preventative. But remediation, or even knowing that we need to remediate, so far is outside the scope of the work we've done, but it's a critical question that we have to
Well,
address.
and the other thing is that, any additional regulation has to be approved by the legislative body. And any additional regulation in Jackson stirs things up, no matter how common sensible it might be. And so, for something, for any of these preventive measures to be incorporated into our regulations is going to require a compelling argument. And so, I guess,
So that brings us back to the point.
before we even get to the enforcement question, it's
What are the real threats?
what needs to be done to present the information to the town in a way that, that elicits a desire on the town's part to do something.
Now, Ed mentioned ground truthing was part of what we did. If you were to drive around and look at the sites that we saw in our PCS windshield survey, is there enough local knowledge that some of you might say, well, we know that that gas station actually might have sloppy practices and maybe some follow-up might be necessary? Is that right?
I think that will be the ongoing discussion, and I wrote down, before we even look at enforcement and education, let's get out there and, and talk to the Eagle, and to say, hey, as you, fill your tractors with fuel, as you're putting your herbicides in the hopper to go out on the course, be careful when you use it. Maybe it'd be better to use it on a sunny day rather than a rainy day, so it doesn't leach in quite so quick. I think there are things that education would help with before we even consider some kind of
That are just
enforcement.
voluntarily offered as part of some of the measures you can take. Exactly. And you mentioned the Eagle, and I looked at the report. It must be the golf course because it's called out because it's within the wellhead protection zone. Is it the one over near across the other side of the river? What is the neighborhood that comes in? I know cross country skiing. I see it. There's a
Right,
lo-
Cameron Drive.
Cameron
Drive. It might be within that zone of the wellhead protection.
Mhm.
That's why it's called out, because it's within the wellhead protection.
Yes,
Okay.
one right there.
So the next step would be a larger community.
It would be great for our next step to have a larger community, if you're comfortable to have a larger audience hear our presentation. And the presentation, it's not, the DES's language was, the task 2 was this groundwater protection ordinance review. But a lot of our presentation, a lot of what can be done isn't the regulatory, legal, necessarily approach. There's lots that can be done to make, and like Dick mentioned, education, again, BMPs, best management practices, that are voluntary, but through education, become the way people
And
practice.
do you have a time frame in mind for when?
We would love to have it as soon as you're comfortable. Our only time frame is we, as part of the grant, which ends for us at the end of July, that we have promised we would do outreach, and this would probably qualify all towns who want to have at least met with everyone before July. It would be wonderful to have the full presentation happen
I mean, I think I
starting point.
would defer to Bill as to when, that might be scheduled. It sounds like it's.
And we have to reach the Conservation Commission. I think they should be
Right.
right in on any meeting, so
That would be great.
have to ask them, when, and I don't think it should be necessarily on one of our meeting nights, but we'll just pick a night. I don't know how many people show up, if it'll be in this room or if it'll be at the Whitney. Either way, we.
Well, it sounds like something we want to involve as much of the community in. So
Yeah,
that's
I think
good.
we should.
When you say by July, do you mean by the end of July?
The end of July is the end of our grant.
Okay.
So our work required within the scope of work needs to be completed by then.
Mhm.
And this would qualify, all 8 towns, we need to have done some kind of outreach.
So if we put it on the next meeting agenda to discuss as to when we might do something
Yeah.
like that, that would give us time to
Yeah, we're
schedule the June
April, so in May, we could,
We have a housing issue, as you all know, that got approved by the town at the town meeting. And so we've set a meeting, I think it's June 12th, about that, and we're hoping to get a good turnout. So in my view, that might be a really opportune time to publicize this and make sure that people are savvy about it, and then we might set a meeting for that.
end of June or something.
Yeah, at the end of June or early July,
That would be
if
great.
that seems suitable.
That'd be good.
Well, why don't we-
June 21st, we'll do it on solstice.
How are
Longest
you
day of
going
the
to
year.
actually attract people to this? Could you use another venue?
Tell them regulation is coming, that'll bring them.
Or just, why don't we have it at the barn at the Eagle Mountain House with an open bar?
That'll bring them in.
Well,
Bring 'em in.
people are interested in drinking water.
Well, we open bar for drinking water.
Yeah, tap water.
Then we
Better ice cube.
won't let them know that until they get there.
Yeah, no water to certain things.
I'm always concerned about how you actually, get people. Everybody, the
Right.
Whitney Center, I just,
Not easy.
not another one. I don't know. Whatever.
And the more that show that, the outcome is usually the better.
In your collective memories, have there been any pollution threats that have risen to public attention in Jackson in recent years?
Was there something or other about the gas station a few years ago?
They pulled their tanks.
Yeah.
That was, if your tanks were 20 years old, you had to pull them and put in new double wall
Liner kind of.
with sensors,
Monitoring
leak
systems.
sensors.
Yep.
And they chose not to go to that expense. I don't think their gas sales would have justified. They're doing what they do now, fix things.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's what they're really good at.
Yeah,
So I think the gas sales will,
yeah.
you do it because you're a gas station, but
This is just a finding that we had that's not written, but it was just our experience. And that is that one of the reasons why we got involved in the PCS, the Potential Contamination Site Review in cars, this windshield survey. And as Ann mentioned, the resources of the state are just not there. So it's happily, we don't have major issues, like you can't remember a major pollution issue. Thank God. But who's watching our water supply? We don't have the local resources, we don't have the state resources. We're some volunteers who collect a little bit of data, but who's watching our water supply when we know that Merrimack Aquifer, not too far south of us, got severely polluted? We know that the gasoline companies and Exxon lost a lawsuit because of their MTBE.
That's why I live on a mountain.
Pardon?
That's why I live on a mountain.
It's a good idea.
That is,
Highest up
So
there.
I wish those
everybody's downhill from me.
No, it's great, but so that was significant pollution, and there's been a court settlement, and now there's $250 million for us to spend on remedial measures. But this is, I don't know how we actually go from here.
And some people have talked about Jackson being like a teacup. That there is this little tiny village with floodplain issues, but everything else rises up from it. And I think an important thing to realize, granted, many of us are uphill, but we often have wells that go down to those, down 600 feet or whatever to where the village is. So it all comes back, it's all important to us.
And the other thing about what we learned is that there are contaminants, significant contaminants that are not regulated by the state. Pharmaceuticals are not regulated. Personal products are not regulated. So we don't really know fully what's in our water.
And how many, underground oil tanks are there left in Jackson? And also in Jackson, from what Tasker was telling me years ago, we have so many, true artesian wells in Jackson where the well is overflowing without a pump. Percentage-wise, I think it's more in Jackson than any place else in the state. So all of that should.
But it goes back to what you were saying, Dick, about education. If we could just begin to have the conversation and raise these questions, we might be able to figure out how we might put a little bit more attention on this.
Yeah.
And there are some old cesspools, I'm sure, some of the old camps have, who knows what going on.
The data that was collected in that volunteer survey that you mentioned, is that data still available somewhere?
I expect it is, and I expect they still offer it. Do you know if the VBRAP program is still offered?
I think it's still offered. I think, I don't know how well the database is incorporated.
The only
data from
significant
volunteer
problem we
programs.
found was that when we were right across the road from, what's that? Nesselnook. When we were right across Route 16 or right across the river from Nesselnook, they had a very high salt content. And, that's because all of that stuff comes down along the Ellis River and the Missouri and so on from the salt that gets applied all along Route 16.
And when
Sorry?
when was that done?
We studied it for probably a 2 or 3 year period. I guess it was probably around 2004, 5, 6 or something like that.
So, if something like that, which doesn't sound like it costs a whole lot, could be repeated.
It was totally free, I
That
think.
might show some of that change.
That you
Right.
actually
Because again, that something like that is going to be more compelling than anything, in the meeting, if you're showing, you say, here's where we were in 2004,
Yeah.
here's where it is now in 2017, and so,
I wonder if
something
that-
is happening.
I wonder if that comparative data might exist
Yeah.
in the water department, who probably measures water quality on a regular basis. And maybe the trend data might be available.
There's
The
plans.
water precinct?
Yeah.
Okay.
USGS has a lot of data as well, but the salinity issue is documented in the state. And that's on the list of the top 4 common contaminants in groundwater, and salinity is one of them from road salt. And there are programs that any municipality can have their DPW guys go through called Green Pro to really look at how are you applying salt, and maybe don't here and less here.
Well, why not, this is the perfect time to do it before you have a meeting. Maybe at various sites, get some folks to volunteer to get their water tested and, see where we stand, see if we actually have any problems. And you could, in different areas, especially down low here in the village, I would guess that, because I had some water tested years ago, and it was very high in salt. And that was because the town put a culvert right through right above our well, which I had them change.
But, this project anyways is truly looking from a proactive standpoint. It's well understood that these threats are coming. That's a simple point.
I think very easily you could get, I think a spot might be Chris's Farm Inn, and check their water, because that's right at the bottom of Tin Mine, and then lower places along Carter Notch. Just an idea.
And even if the comparative data doesn't show that there's a problem now, it may show a trend
It's a baseline.
that can lead to a problem if the trend continues. But anyways, that just, something like that is going to be more compelling than a theoretical, threat that might be out there in terms of convince the public.
Oh, I think we have to do a better education that it is there. It's not a might, it's there.
But you're gonna have to
And-
show people that.
Right, that's what I mean, I'm hearing that we really have to have a rigorous explanation of here are very real threats. Here where it's too late, Pelham, New Hampshire, the groundwater quality is done, for the moment, it's a pretty, there's tough, we could bring up examples statewide, but they're there, they're here, you look at what we use at home, those are all any solvents or products you use. There's been spills, I know about it in my parents' neighborhood in Jackson, had a kerosene leaking tank, someone brought up.
We had one at the town hall.
Yeah, they're happening, there's small
They
incidental spills.
blew the fuel tank up, filling it, it didn't whistle,
Yeah, right,
and then
the overfill fails
I
and,
remember, it was almost a year of monitoring and pumping whatever groundwater
correct, at great
into that
expense.
big collection tank until it was clean. And my biggest fear is Route 16 with all the fuel trucks
Yep.
that run right
Tanker
up Route
trucks.
16
Traffic.
almost every day. I mean, I can't think of a day that, P&H or Irving or somebody, and our water supply is right next to them. Something happens up by the Dana place along the road, and we're gonna have to shut down the water for the downtown area of town.
And another thing I think that could be important about this, drinking water, having understanding about radon and arsenic. I think a lot of people just don't have a clue and don't get their water tested for that.
Naturally occurring, right?
And so we could get information to put out on tables about that as well.
There's available funding that's just rolling out from the big settlement that the state of New Hampshire got from Exxon. There was MTBE lawsuit, and they didn't settle, and it's $270 million available just for groundwater protection. That's why it's so important statewide. And so that would be an avenue that municipalities like yourselves could hire someone like we did, a consultant to do next step type you want.
Well, that'll take a long time to get that money. I mean, we have a certain budget, don't we?
Not have to cover any kind of consultancy.
Yeah.
No. I was saying to maybe do a dozen or so water tests in different parts of the town.
The water testing is free, I think. We don't pay a thing.
I don't know, I just,
Well, one place to start would be the water precinct, because I'm sure they do regular water
Yeah.
tests, and you just
Right,
can't
maybe
get
get
that.
them the facility and maybe get them, do sort of pro bono for the towns since they're all town members.
So, let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting
Okay.
to sort of set a date for this.
And maybe we ask, would someone, Scott, be willing to be a liaison with us? Because with all these good ideas, it might be helpful to kind of talk them through.
We can discuss that at the meeting too.
Okay.
I'm not, I've got way too much.
I'm sure it has to
Um,
try to be the go-between.
It might be somebody on the Conservation Commission that we could work with about it.
yeah.
Okay, this has been very, very helpful for us.
And so is there any dates that would not work for you guys for this sort of community meeting, or dates that you prefer?
Well, you mentioned the second half of June, early July.
Anything in
sounds good.
June? Tom,
Probably end of June.
June's a good month for me.
Looks good.
Okay.
And I had initially reached out to Dick to kick this off, so just to backtrack. Thank you, Dick, for
It was hard to
bringing this to the
see.
agenda. I visited his home, I think.
Very
And
persuasive.
you going to leave me your notes? I'm sure I missed out.
Yes, I have a copy for you.
Great, thanks.
No, you take that, that really is, that's, TD Bank is happy. to-
Thank you, and I think my number was distributed with, I'll leave a few cards, so if anything else came to mind, I'm sorry.
And I brought a couple for every cards if anybody needs one. And when we sent this out electronically, it's because I didn't want to ask the town to crank them out on their their machine, I was hoping, you know, you can either read it or copy it at home. I wouldn't bother with the model groundwater protection ordinances. I will have that. If we get that far, I will produce that.
Well, we have,
Or Ann will produce it for us.
yes, if you do print it, do not print Appendix B. It's just,
Was that attached to that email?
Yes.
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 It was the two reports and this guidance document which was used to, as the, sort of the, produce a gap analysis at looking what all the towns had.
And it's about double the size of our ordinance for every other matter in Jackson.
The bulk of it is a list of all regulated substances, so it looks scarier than it is.
One thing you might consider in talking to other towns is not just planning board, but also
And you
conservation.
want to read those, we could leave them in the,
If I could read all the copies through my own ones, I'll work.
Oh, okay.
I can do
that's
that.
fine. All right.
Thanks. I'm sorry, what was that last comment?
Thanks.
To see
Thanks, everybody.
conservation commission people as well as planning board people and other towns.
We would love to have, yeah, that commission included. They were on, I think I saw them on the distribution of the documents.
Well, when Bill gets back, he's on the constitution. So that's why he goes first. Go between there, so I think we'll get to the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Dick.
Come again, they love having company.
All right, subdivision regulations, fee schedule.
Okay, so, well, I know you're holding your breath about it. So basically, Julie Hoyt and I were looking at, I guess it started with the note having come around from where the deeds get filed. Yeah, I said double-sided. How about that for conservation? And so we realized that what Jackson is charging is either less than it should be or more than it should be. And so these are just hand-scribbled proposals on how we would change it. Now, granted, in our,
When you say less or more, is that according to what we're actually?
well, for
paying?
example, we were saying that per plan sheet, they had to pay $40 to file things, and the registry only lost $28. So we
Yeah,
were.
but we have to send it down in a tube. They mail it. So
Okay,
we're, you know, I wouldn't back off on any of it.
okay, that's a
too
good
much.
point.
Because one, you're always asking the office to do something.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that alone, I mean, they're paid and
yeah.
it's all part of the deal, but still, anytime we can add to the,
Okay, so keep the $40 is fine.
I would, I mean, I don't see that, you know, it's $12 less, and I can, if I had to bring it over to the post office, I'd have to stop and get it.
But it's also, that's per sheet.
That's per sheet. So we should have $28 there, and we should have postage, I think, as a different item there. Because we do have postage costs for mailing certified letters,
Right,
and that's not spelled out. But we could have postage costs for other fees.
So it'd be $28 plus postage costs in the same way as our estimated bill.
or you could say $30 and not even just say, well, that should cover postage and
Okay.
time.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes it much simpler, I think.
Yeah,
The 28 per sheet, is that the recording fee?
Yes.
yes, that's what we have to pay.
Oh. So yeah, if it was $30 a sheet.
If they made it 30,
That would
then it'll cover
$2.
incidentals.
$2 per sheet to cover the postage. Yeah, so
Great,
Because it has to go down in one of those tubes.
yeah.
And,
And then Julie says, we really, the postage, let's see, the notice publication and posting fees, she said we'd really be better off charging $50 for that.
mhm.
So that's fine. And then on the reverse, it really was just explaining. I looked at all the different, or a variety of towns' And they had lots of different fees that they were collecting for subdivision, major, minor, etc. So I just wrote down flat fee because some of them had small differentiations between what type of minor subdivision and so on. So we're just collecting a flat fee. So I think that's all.
And what's the note beside secretary's name?
So I was thinking the secretary's time, I thought that applied to Julie, but she said no, that her time is paid by the applicant who brings in materials, that that's part of what, I'm not exactly sure why, but she said that that's covered, I guess, by the flat fee for the minor subdivision and all that kind of thing. She said that the secretary's time there is my time for what I bill. And, so a 15-minute hearing or 20-minute hearing, if I'm getting paid $25 an hour, I think $36 is totally adequate to cover the fee that I would charge for taking the minutes. It would be different probably if we were paying a person who's not a planning board member to take the minutes, and we're paying them $25 an hour to sit here, and we're paying them $25 an hour for them to do the minutes. That would be a more expensive thing.
So is the 36 just a flat fee, or?
Yeah. It's just reimbursing the town for whatever I bill the town later if it's a subdivision type thing.
But your bill goes against the planning board budget?
Yes.
Does 36 then go to the planning board budget or?
Yes, it does. Yeah, all these fees come into the planning board, as I understand it.
Under the payable for county, the 1249, 1250, 1749, 1750, those.
Yes, I think that was Julie recommending us just.
Just to make it easier.
Yeah.
You'll want to have
But
that penny.
it's 1249, is that like the exact fee that is
Exactly.
charged? So,
Yeah.
But yeah, 1250.
We're not making money on that,
Penny's a penny.
but. So far.
So do these changes require a vote?
I think it's probably smart to do a vote, and then she'll just post them on the website and make it available to people who are asking about our fees.
Do I have a motion to accept the changes according to $30 per sheet for recording fees at the registry, $50 for notification posting fees, adding the descriptive flat fee to the minor subdivision, and changing the 49 cents to 50 cents in those.
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Let's see, on the agenda, the next item is that conference. I don't know how many people are anxious to go down to Concord for it. I can't understand why they don't have them a little bit further north.
And this is what they did at Lincoln, years ago.
That's right, they've done it sometimes in Lincoln and other areas closer to us. It's a very helpful conference to go to. But it's just so unreasonable to have to go, 2.5 or so hours to get there.
Also, when I went, I'm assuming it's set up the same way, but it's a series of workshops and you choose the
Right, you
specific
pick your-
things. So it's not that you're just sitting there listening to whatever,
Yeah.
the whole time. You get to focus on particular issues that are greater concern or mystery, to you. So it may
And
be-
anybody willing to go, the planning board has voted in the past to pay the fee for, the registration. So.
And lunch.
And dinner.
But not gas and overnight.
How long was it start first thing in the morning and go all day?
Yeah, I think it's 9 to 4, 9 to 3 or something.
Okay.
And they are terrific, very informative programs, but
But way down there.
way down there.
No, I'd like to go to that. I looked at it, but I don't know how much help this is gonna be right now,
Yeah.
so I can't commit this year. I know I should.
What's the date?
It's 28th this month.
This month.
I'm gonna be away on that too.
I'll think about it.
Okay, great.
It's pretty interesting, even because you pick an area or a couple of areas that you want to, gain some knowledge in. And the workshops that I've been doing too, they're really good. I mean, they usually have pretty good speakers and they put out some good information, so.
And then
You
there's
had something on this, Betsy?
Yeah, take this.
there's a lot of
And I can make
discussion
copies of
goes on.
that.
Question, a lot of the more interesting part is the question and answer part of the discussion part of it after the presentations. So I guess we're in full compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program.
Yeah, and so I was wondering to what extent we ought to make that public. We've gotten, letters from the state and the people in the federal government that work on it saying that we're in compliance. What it means is that people can get their flood insurance policies, I guess, with the federal government rather than just having to pay as much as they would pay if it weren't a town that is in compliance. And so,
Is that something that someone getting insurance would need to know about, or would that come up in the process of getting?
well, it's not really clear to me. She said if the town is interested, it's not required, but you can promote the National Flood Insurance Program by having FEMA publications available at Town Hall. I asked her if it affects eligibility and requirements for purchasing flood insurance, and she didn't really address that. But it seems to me that given the fact that we've had some bizarre flood instances, it probably would be smart to just put something out that we have the flood insurance program and that people can come here. I don't know if we have all the documents yet that people might want, but that people could come here and get those if needed. Does that make sense? Should we worry about it?
Well, it applies to some of the towns, but
Yeah, not much.
all of the towns.
Right, if you're happy to do
We're stopping.
My house and my well, or?
If he needs flood
He needs flood
insurance,
insurance, it's valuable for the rest of the town.
So I don't know, certainly Bartlett had huge issues. Will Jackson get them? Who knows?
Have we ever had a
Nothing like
piece of
Bartlett.
property?
I don't think so.
Well, we've.
Well, I have seen
It's the
water,
golf course got flooded.
at up to the J-Town Dell. Or the
Yeah.
loop flooded.
Yeah.
I mean, there was water, so, the way,
1980s.
Well, why don't, when we do this water meeting, let's have the flood insurance program information there.
it's water.
Okay,
Makes sense.
that's
Well,
solid.
I guess to me, the most pertinent thing would be is, if I wanted insurance, because I lived somewhere where I thought might flood, and didn't know about any of this, and was getting insurance through,
Homeowner insurance.
homeowner insurance, would this come up through that process so that I knew what my options, or would I need to know about this beforehand?
Yeah,
Maybe within the building permit, we could, put in a phrase that says, if you're in a zone, flood zone.
Right, because the zones are all numbered. But, the flood zone, according to the flood maps, which is part of that,
Well, I think they established that,
yeah.
I remember,
Right, what I'm saying is that you can identify that
yeah,
if you're in this particular zone, then,
you would qualify for it.
Do we have a map?
yes,
Yeah, there is a.
We have a lot of maps.
Yeah. And they just give you the edge.
yeah.
the 100-year floodplain.
Huh?
One other piece of other business, I guess, just a quick review as to what's going on so far with the housing effort. So on April 6th, last Friday, we first met with Robin Glenn and signed the grant. And Robin also went over, what's entailed in that grant, what the requirements are, timeline that they expect, that sort of thing. And she will be monitoring, when we provide a monthly report to her as to what's gone on, she'll be monitoring our activity. She, I think, is hoping that we will provide something of a model or example that they can then use once they try to get other towns and the state involved in this initiative. She also sees Jackson as particularly challenged, so for whatever that's worth. So the first steps are going to be to do a series of stakeholder interviews, which may include some focus group type interviews and discussions. We're in the process of putting together a list of people and businesses that we feel would be good contributors to these interviews. And that's really to start to sort of get a sense as to what the town wants and what the town needs from a variety of perspectives, including people that, that really, for one reason or another, are not maybe interested in providing more various types of housing. Someone that wants to keep their taxes as low as possible and doesn't want to do anything that's going to increase educational costs, for example, or someone that really would like to get the bridge. But to really, to gather that kind of information through these interviews, we will then also put out a survey to allow everybody in the community to contribute their opinion and their answers to several questions that we're in the process of putting together. That survey will be available electronically. We'll also have copies available here at the town office, maybe the library or other locations that people can pick it up, so that anyone, and I think we'll also publicize a phone number so that if anyone wants us to mail a copy of the survey, they can call and take care of that. We've discussed even doing a postcard mailing that would go out to, if not everybody, at least those that are not resident in the town, to solicit as much feedback as possible. Beyond the interviews and the survey, we're planning on having a community informational meeting on June 12th. And the intent of that meeting will be to provide what materials we have and we've gathered and again to bring in as much feedback from the town as to what the town wants. And also to just provide some education as to what the initiative really involves when we talk about increased housing stock, what that means, what types of housing stock we're talking about, etc. So that's in broad terms is where we're at the moment.
Question, it just occurred to me, with this meeting June 12th and the tax bill going out not long before that, it usually goes out near the end of May, what about just inserting a little tiny flyer in there saying this meeting's coming up, here are the reasons why it's a concern, come and voice your opinion, go online to see such and such. That would be a really cheap way for us to notify people.
I think, especially if we came in and stuffed envelopes, with that for the office, they'd be really happy to have that help.
Great, so
And we just make up that little blurb sheet or some sort.
how would we do this? Would we start by talking to Karen Burton or in the selectman's office? What would we start with?
I think
I
you,
think just ask
I think you'd have to get permission from the selectmen to do it, wouldn't you?
the town clerk, they're pretty independent. But we could just ask her if we couldn't, tag on to
Great.
their
As
name.
long as you have it prepared.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if we had it and we helped stuff.
Yep.
uh,
And if there was any increased postage cost because of it, it would push the way it, the steering committee has the funds to cover something like that.
People do look at the tax bill.
Yes, and if we had this a bright pink or purple or something other thing would really stand out.
I was very impressed with those two people that they were so good at drawing out. They want to hear what you have to say. They weren't there to lecture or to,
Pontificate.
no, and they were really good at, we want you to get the folks to give their ideas. That's what we want to do, is get their ideas. And they were really good at it.
I think they showed passion for their, for their focus. They're very into it.
Are you talking about the groundwater people and you're talking about Plan New Hampshire, or are you both talking groundwater? Or
Oh, no, I was on Plan New Hampshire.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I went to that meeting. But it's the same idea. They want you invested in it, it's your town. We want your ideas.
And the
Well-
groundwater people did it well too.
well, that's what I'm saying. I thought you were talking about the groundwater.
Well, it could have been, I mean.
Because they asked us, and they seemed to be interested, and they seemed to be very passionate about their, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Hey, just a quick question. What's going on up at Dana Place? Anything? I see some stuff out and back. Are
They're
they tearing it down?
gutting it. The structure is gonna stay there, they're gonna, I can't remember, Kevin, the building inspector, told me how many rooms, they're gonna be,
And so are they
Rentals. not condos, they're not, and it's gonna be,
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful structure. I was concerned that everybody said it was just a total tear down.
Right.
And from the outside, it doesn't look that way, but
the owner has gone through many permutations of what he wanted to do there. And as we have said, no, he has come back to this of, rehab that building.
there's some detritus out back, I noticed this morning.
So when you say rentals, what
Like a
kind?
hotel or?
It's sort of more, like a motel, but not,
Not ownership?
not ownership. It's not going to be a
Condo or
timeshares or.
It's not affordable housing.
He did approach.
It might
at
be.
one point. He did
What?
approach us at one point to
$50 a night,
have a
right?
discussion, and we
Only if you're really wealthy.
That's the going rate.
I always thought that was a very attractive building, and I
It is.
hated to see it taken down and some, ugly thing put up there, some kind of donuts or something.
What was it?
Well, we wouldn't have that, but he wanted to put up duplexes and, 6 or 8 different ideas. No,
Well,
Any other business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd make that motion.
I would second it, right on his.
All in favor?
He beats me to it every time, you know that?
You don't have a hat.
I gotta work
If
for
I
that.
had a cigar, I'd light that.